A bustling international terminal, with its high ceilings and constant flow of travelers, usually pulsed with energy and purpose. In one of the sprawling concourses of a major airport, a scene unfolded that would upend the lives of those passing through its corridors, a shocking disruption in an otherwise ordinary night. It started when an airport janitor, Luis Morales, noticed an unusual stillness near a remote gate area that was typically quiet at the end of a long shift. While sweeping near a row of unused boarding bridges, he glimpsed something odd on the polished tiled floor, a figure lying motionless amid scattered papers. His heart quickened as he approached, and he soon discovered the body of a mid-level airline operations coordinator named Evan Pierce. Evan lay on his back, eyes staring blankly at the overhead lights, his skin marked by a deep, jagged bruise across his temple. In his grasp, clutched in trembling fingers, was a torn piece of paper bearing the message, "Some secrets are better left alone." Luis's startled cry summoned security, and within minutes, uniformed officers arrived to cordon off the area. Detective Naomi Fields, known for her unerring attention to detail and unshakable resolve, took charge. The area was eerily undisturbed. The scattered debris and the victim's carefully arranged posture suggested that nothing had been left to chance. There was no sign of a struggle, no overturned chairs or scuffed personal belongings. Every element of the scene, from the precise placement of the paper to the calm way Evan's body rested, pointed toward a deliberate act with a specific purpose. In the hours that followed, Detective Fields began a series of interviews with airport employees and travelers who had been present that night. One maintenance worker recalled that Evan had been unusually absorbed in his work during the previous week. He kept looking over his shoulder, the man said, his voice low with a mixture of concern and disbelief. "I even saw him huddled near a computer terminal, after his shift, scribbling in a notebook. I thought he was just stressed, but now, I'm not so sure." A fellow operations coordinator described Evan as someone who had grown increasingly restless and secretive, spending extra time in isolated parts of the terminal after hours. Such testimonies painted a picture of a man determined to uncover something hidden, a truth that had ultimately made him a target. At Evan's modest apartment near the terminal's employee housing, investigators discovered a small collection of personal items that shed light on his double life. Among his possessions was a battered leather notebook filled with neat, precise entries documenting daily observations and irregularities in the airline's internal operations. Initially, the pages contained routine notes, shifts in flight schedules, minor changes in cargo logs, and even small reminders of upcoming meetings. However, as the pages turned, the entries grew more erratic. Evan had recorded subtle discrepancies in the tracking of aircraft parts and fuel shipments. One entry, scrawled in urgent handwriting, read, "Numbers don't match, spare parts missing from shipment logs, must verify the inventory reports before it all goes dark." Another page mentioned an unidentified name with a terse comment, "If he finds out, no one will." The tone was fraught with tension, a secret investigation that had escalated to dangerous proportions. Digital forensics experts later recovered deleted files from Evan's work laptop, left on a terminal in a rarely used corner of the operations center. Among these was a series of encrypted emails exchanged with an unknown correspondent who signed only as Raven. One recovered message warned, "Do not pursue the trail any further, or you will vanish." Although the sender's identity remained obscured by layers of encryption, the stark language left no doubt that Evan's probing had attracted unwanted attention. Detective Fields' inquiry soon widened beyond the immediate confines of the terminal. She obtained access to internal reports from the airline's corporate office, documents that, on the surface, detailed routine maintenance schedules and inventory logs. However, when scrutinized closely, a disturbing pattern emerged. Over the past several months, small amounts of equipment and supplies had been systematically unaccounted for, missing from the logs yet recorded in financial transfers to an off-site account. The irregularities, while individually negligible, accumulated over time into a significant discrepancy. Forensic accountants testified that the pattern was too consistent to be an accident. It appeared to be a deliberate redirection of assets. Further investigations revealed that Evan had been following this trail relentlessly. His recovered journal entries and digital files indicated that he had uncovered evidence linking the missing assets to a covert operation run by a group of mid-level managers. These individuals, entrusted with overseeing critical logistics, had been secretly funneling funds and equipment to an external organization that specialized in reselling high-demand parts on the black market. The motive, as Evan had surmised in his desperate notes, was greed, a hidden network that profited from the underhanded diversion of resources that should have been used to ensure the safety and efficiency of airline operations. In one tense interview, a former supervisor, who had resigned under mysterious circumstances, confirmed that there had been unusual discussions about balancing the books and adjusting the inventory in ways that were never explained. I recall a conversation where someone said that if any discrepancies were discovered, the costs would be covered up, and that anyone asking too many questions would be dealt with, the supervisor said quietly. His recollection, while vague, aligned with the warnings embedded in Evan's messages. As Detective Fields delved deeper, she received a series of anonymous phone calls warning her to cease her investigation. A distorted voice on one such call stated, "Stop following the trail or you will join the others." Though the calls offered no further details, their tone was unmistakably menacing. Instead of deterring her, these threats steeled her resolve. Every warning, every cryptic message, reinforced the notion that Evan's murder was no random act but part of a broader effort to silence a dangerous inquiry. Digital traces soon led Detective Fields to a seemingly unrelated but equally disturbing lead: discrepancies in the airline's fuel purchase records. In an internal audit report that had been mistakenly left on a printer in the corporate office, auditors had noted that certain fuel shipments had been adjusted downwards by a small margin, a difference that over time translated into a substantial financial gain for someone in the upper echelons of the operation. Cross-referencing these records with the dates from Evan's journal revealed that the adjustments occurred on the same days as the missing equipment transfers. The connections grew too strong to ignore, suggesting that a single orchestrated scheme was at work, spanning both physical assets and financial data. As the investigation neared its peak, Detective Fields convened a team of forensic accountants and cyber specialists to reconstruct the complete financial trail. They discovered that the missing funds were being transferred to a series of offshore bank accounts, managed through a labyrinth of shell companies. The sums, while small on an individual basis, added up to a significant amount, money that could easily finance an underground resale operation. The team's detailed report concluded that the operation was not the work of a single rogue employee, but a coordinated effort involving multiple layers of management. One particularly damning digital memo, retrieved from a backup server, read, "Maintain secrecy at all costs. If the truth surfaces, ensure that it is extinguished." The memo, unsigned and heavily encrypted, was the final piece that confirmed Evan's worst fears: someone was determined to bury the truth by any means necessary. In a breakthrough, Detective Fields' team managed to match the digital fingerprints of the anonymous Raven emails with an IP address linked to a secure office in the airline's corporate headquarters. With the help of federal agents, they obtained a search warrant and raided the office. There, hidden among stacks of inconspicuous files, they found a detailed ledger that tracked every transfer and adjustment that had occurred over the past year. The ledger was maintained in meticulous detail, listing every missing asset, every altered record, and every unauthorized transfer. The entries were signed by a mid-level executive whose identity, while not widely known, had emerged as a key figure in the operation. Confronted with this evidence, the executive, whom investigators later identified as Martin Hughes, initially denied any wrongdoing. In a tense interrogation session, he insisted that the discrepancies were mere accounting adjustments meant to reconcile minor errors in the system. But as Detective Fields laid out the painstaking details of the ledger, Hughes's calm facade began to crumble. Under mounting pressure, he admitted that he had been instructed to correct the financial records whenever anomalies were discovered, and that failure to do so would have consequences. His confession, delivered in a measured tone laden with regret, confirmed what the investigation had long suspected: the discrepancies were a deliberate, systematic effort to siphon resources away from the airline's legitimate operations. Federal prosecutors soon brought charges against several individuals implicated in the cover-up. The case, which had evolved from a routine missing person investigation into a sprawling web of corruption, was presented before a grand jury. In a series of closed-door sessions, the evidence was laid out in stark detail, a montage of forensic reports, digital audit trails, and eyewitness testimonies that painted a damning portrait of a conspiracy reaching into the highest echelons of the corporate hierarchy. The grand jury returned indictments on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to murder, directly linking the operation to the silencing of Evan Pierce. The ensuing trial was a marathon of legal arguments, witness testimonies, and expert analyses. In a packed courtroom, where the atmosphere was charged with tension, prosecutors detailed the meticulous nature of the cover-up. They presented the recovered ledger, the digital remnants of deleted emails, and forensic reports that traced the missing funds to offshore accounts. One forensic accountant took the stand and, using charts and timelines, demonstrated how the small daily discrepancies accumulated into a staggering losses that could only be the result of deliberate misappropriation. The prosecution argued that Evans' persistent documentation and his unyielding commitment to uncovering the truth had upset those who profited from the illicit scheme, ultimately leading to his murder as a means of ensuring that the secret would remain buried. Witnesses from within the airline's operations provided harrowing accounts of a workplace steeped in secrecy and fear. Former employees described being pressured into silence and warned that any inquiry into the financial records would be met with swift action. Their testimonies, coupled with the damning evidence, left little room for doubt about the orchestrated nature of the crime. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the trial's conclusion did not deliver a perfect sense of closure. While several mid-level managers and financial officers were convicted and sentenced to long prison terms, the top brass of the conspiracy managed to evade the harshest penalties by invoking legal technicalities and corporate protections. Martin Hughes received a significant sentence for his role in authorizing the adjustments, but many in the courtroom left with the disquieting impression that the true mastermind behind the cover-up remained unidentified, a specter cloaked in redacted documents and whispered about in shadowy corners. In the aftermath of the trial, the impact of the investigation reverberated far beyond the walls of the courtroom. Regulatory bodies implemented sweeping reforms to enhance transparency in corporate accounting practices and to strengthen protections for whistleblowers. Community activists and consumer groups rallied for greater oversight of large organizations, ensuring that the legacy of Evan Pierce's unwavering dedication to the truth would not be forgotten. The case sparked a broader conversation about accountability in modern institutions, prompting local governments to re-examine internal practices and to take steps toward preventing similar abuses in the future. Detective Fields, though lauded for her tenacity, carried the weight of the case with quiet solemnity. In the years that followed, she often revisited the evidence in the stillness of her modest office, a space lined with case files, photographs, and digital backups that chronicled every painstaking detail of the investigation. Each artifact, from the torn scrap of paper with its haunting message to the meticulous entries in Evan's leather-bound notebook, was a reminder of the high cost of silence and the enduring courage required to unearth buried truths. In time, the story of Evan Pierce became part of local lore, a narrative recounted in hushed tones at community meetings, in discussions among reform advocates, and even in academic seminars on investigative journalism and corporate ethics. His legacy was honored by those who believed that transparency and accountability were the cornerstones of a just society. While the legal system had delivered some measure of justice, the unresolved mysteries, the shadowy figure caught on security footage, the anonymous threats that continued to surface, and the ultimate identity of the person behind the orchestrated cover-up remained as reminders that corruption was a persistent and evolving foe. Every day, as the busy terminal pulsed with the sound of footsteps, rolling suitcases, and the distant hum of announcements, there was a quiet acknowledgement among those who worked there that not all secrets could be contained behind locked doors and neatly balanced accounts. For Detective Fields, each new case was approached with the same unwavering resolve, a determination to question every anomaly and to pursue every lead, no matter how deeply hidden. The investigation into Evan Pierce's murder had taught her that truth was fragile, a delicate tapestry woven from countless threads of human action, and that every uncovered secret was a victory in the ongoing battle against injustice. Though the case did not conclude with a singular triumphant moment, a clean unmasking of every culprit, it ultimately transformed the community. The airline and its parent corporation were forced to adopt new stringent oversight measures, and public trust was gradually restored through a series of reforms and policy changes. The legacy of Evan's bravery, however, lived on as a catalyst for change, inspiring a new generation of journalists, auditors, and investigators who pledged to hold power accountable. In a final somber gesture that epitomized the unresolved nature of the case, Detective Fields received an unmarked envelope one chilly morning. Inside was a single typed note that read, "Truth, though elusive, will always find its way." There was no signature, no further explanation, just a quiet promise that the pursuit of honesty was a relentless journey. And so, in the ever-moving, ceaseless energy of the transit hub, amidst the myriad faces of daily travelers and the constant shuffle of life, the story of Evan Pierce remained woven into the fabric of that place, a persistent reminder that even in the most ordinary of settings, the quest for truth could ignite the most extraordinary, and sometimes tragic, tales. Every time a new piece of evidence was uncovered or a financial anomaly questioned, it served as a small but potent act of resistance against the forces that sought to keep secrets hidden. Detective Fields continued her work, driven by the conviction that every life lost in the pursuit of truth, every whisper of corruption, was a call to action. The legacy of that long-ago night, a night when routine and revelation collided in a display of human frailty and hidden ambition, endured as a testament to the power of determination, the importance of vigilance, and the unyielding belief that eventually, every secret would be forced into the light. In the end, the case was not defined by neat conclusions or by the unmasking of every perpetrator. Instead, it was a layered narrative of courage, betrayal, and the enduring struggle for accountability, a story that, despite its many unresolved mysteries, reminded everyone that the fight for truth is a never-ending endeavor, a journey that transforms not only the lives of those directly involved but also the very institutions upon which society relies. And as the terminal continued to hum with life, each announcement, each rolling suitcase, each passing face carried with it the unspoken hope that the truth, however deeply buried, would one day be revealed, and that in the delicate balance between routine and revelation, justice, no matter how elusive, would ultimately prevail. Under the shimmering lights of a sprawling shopping center that served as a modern-day town square, everyday life unfolded with predictable rhythm. Shoppers ambled along polished corridors, children darted between brightly colored storefronts, and the hum of conversation blended with the upbeat music that played overhead. Yet, amid this tableau of commerce and community, a chilling event was about to disrupt the familiar cadence of routine, a moment that would send shockwaves through the hearts of those who believed that the place was a sanctuary of normalcy. It began on a humid summer night, when the mall's evening buzz slowly tapered off and the last stragglers headed for their cars. In a little-known corner of the facility, a narrow corridor leading to a security office, the routine maintenance of the premises was underway. While the cleaning crew methodically swept the floors and restocked supplies, one of the night shift security officers, Devon Miles, noticed an unusual stillness in the area. Devon had patrolled these corridors for years and prided himself on his vigilance. Yet that night, something was distinctly amiss. As he approached a row of closed offices, his flashlight beam fell upon a motionless figure lying on the polished tile. Devon paused, heart pounding, as he recognized the uniform of an assistant manager from one of the popular retail outlets on the lower level. The man, later identified as Carter Hughes, lay slumped near a supply closet with an expression of frozen disbelief etched across his face. A small scrap of paper was clutched in his hand. The hastily scrawled message warned in stark simplicity: "Some secrets refuse to die." Devon immediately radioed for help, his voice trembling with urgency. Within minutes, uniformed officers and forensic teams arrived, their presence transforming the bright open corridor into a grim crime scene. Detective Marissa Delgado, known for her unwavering determination and keen ability to detect anomalies in even the most mundane details, assumed command. Stepping into the scene, she noted that nothing seemed haphazard. There were no signs of a frantic struggle, no toppled boxes or scattered personal effects, only the eerie stillness of a man whose life had been extinguished with calculated precision. Over the next several hours, Detective Delgado began to piece together Carter's final moments. Interviews with the few employees who had remained after closing revealed a series of small but troubling details. Janine, a longtime cashier with a gentle disposition, recalled that Carter had been unusually distracted during his shift. He kept glancing at the security monitors and whispering on the phone, she said, voice quivering. I thought he was just stressed about work, but now I'm not so sure. Another worker, a stock clerk named Malik, mentioned that Carter had left his post early that night to review some discrepancies in the daily reports, an activity that was atypical for someone in his position. Back at Carter's modest apartment, located in a quiet complex not far from the mall, investigators discovered evidence that painted a more complex picture of the victim. Among his personal effects was a battered leather notebook filled with neatly written observations and calculations. Initially, the entries seemed mundane, notes about inventory levels and store performance, but as Delgado flipped through the pages, a pattern emerged. Carter had recorded subtle variances in the cash registers and had meticulously noted discrepancies in the shipment records from various vendors. One entry, written in a hurried scrawl just a week before his death, stated, "The numbers are off by a small margin every day. At this rate, it will add up to something big. I must verify before it becomes too late." The gravity in his words hinted at a hidden truth, a deliberate manipulation of figures that could not be attributed to mere human error. Digital forensics later recovered fragments of deleted emails from Carter's work computer in the security office. Among the recovered files was a terse message, unsigned and encrypted, that warned, "Stop digging or you'll vanish." The stark, chilling tone of the message resonated with the investigators, suggesting that Carter's discovery had provoked a reaction from someone with the power and the resolve to keep certain secrets concealed at all costs. Detective Delgado expanded her inquiry beyond the immediate vicinity of the security office. She interviewed employees from the retail outlet where Carter had worked, and even spoke with longtime maintenance staff who had witnessed subtle changes in the workplace culture over recent months. A former supervisor, who wished to remain anonymous, recalled that management had become increasingly secretive. There were murmurs about adjusting figures, about ensuring that discrepancies were smoothed over, the supervisor confided. "I heard that if anyone tried to expose what was really happening, they'd be warned, sometimes very harshly." These accounts deepened the mystery, suggesting that the irregularities Carter had uncovered were part of a systematic cover-up orchestrated by someone with intimate knowledge of the internal workings. As the investigation progressed, forensic accountants working with the task force analyzed the mall's financial records and internal audit reports. Their findings were alarming. Over the course of several months, small amounts of money had consistently gone missing from the retail outlet's daily cash deposits. Although the individual losses were minimal, their cumulative effect amounted to tens of thousands of dollars, a significant sum that could only be explained by a deliberate scheme to siphon off funds. The transfers were routed through a series of untraceable accounts and hidden behind layers of technical jargon. It became increasingly clear that the operation was not the product of an innocent accounting error, but of a carefully orchestrated network that had been quietly extracting money from the system. Meanwhile, digital experts worked to reconstruct the timeline of Carter's communications. Using advanced data recovery techniques, they pieced together the deleted emails and correlated them with entries in his notebook. The digital evidence reinforced the notion that Carter had been investigating a cover-up that reached deep into the organization's hierarchy. The recovered messages hinted at internal disputes over balancing the books and referenced final adjustments that would ensure that no discrepancies were ever reported to higher authorities. The language was clinical and devoid of emotion, yet it carried an undercurrent of menace. Detective Delgado's team soon began to focus on a few individuals within the management of the retail outlet, and by extension, the parent company that oversaw the mall's operations. One name kept reappearing in internal memos and audit trails: a mid-level manager named Vincent Carter. Vincent, who had been with the company for over a decade, was known for his unwavering professionalism and his unremarkable, almost bland demeanor. However, several former employees hinted that Vincent had been entrusted with overseeing the internal financial adjustments, and that he had been given instructions to make the numbers work by any means necessary. When questioned by Delgado, Vincent offered vague explanations about operational efficiency and ensuring smooth daily operations. His careful, measured responses did little to quell the growing suspicion that he might have been involved in a deliberate scheme to conceal financial irregularities. At the same time, Detective Delgado received an anonymous tip in the form of a letter left on her desk one early morning. The typed note warned, "Examine every number, but tread lightly. You are not the only one watching." The message was brief and devoid of sentiment, yet it carried an unmistakable threat. The note spurred Delgado to intensify her scrutiny of the internal documents. She began to cross-reference the financial discrepancies with the timing of key internal meetings and discovered that on several occasions, the adjustments had been approved by a small circle of executives who rarely interacted with frontline employees. The pattern suggested that the discrepancies were part of an orchestrated effort, a systematic redirection of funds that, when aggregated, amounted to a considerable profit for those involved. Over the next several weeks, the investigation delved into the origins of the missing funds. Forensic accountants mapped out the series of transactions, revealing that the diverted money had been funneled into accounts registered in offshore financial centers, managed through a labyrinth of shell companies. The numbers, when analyzed, demonstrated a disturbing regularity, a steady trickle of funds that was engineered to evade detection by routine audits. The cumulative loss was staggering, and it became clear that the operation had been in place for much longer than anyone had suspected. Detective Delgado arranged a series of covert interviews with current and former employees who had worked in the financial departments of both the retail outlet and its corporate parent. One former accountant, speaking under a pseudonym to protect his identity, described how he had been instructed to adjust the records whenever discrepancies arose. They would say it was just a matter of keeping the books balanced, he explained. But it was more than that. It was a directive to erase any evidence of the true figures. His testimony was both damning and poignant, casting a shadow over what had once been considered standard corporate practice. Meanwhile, digital forensics experts continued to uncover more fragments of the deleted emails. One particularly damning message, recovered from a backup server, read, "If anyone dares to question these numbers, the consequences will be irreversible." The stark warning, delivered without a signature, was a clear indication that the individuals behind the cover-up were prepared to go to any lengths to keep their secret hidden, even if it meant silencing those who might expose them. As the threads of the investigation converged, Detective Delgado faced mounting pressure from both within the department and from the community. Local media had begun to pick up on the discrepancies in the financial reports, and whispers of corruption had spread throughout the region. Community leaders demanded accountability, and a group of concerned citizens organized a town hall meeting to discuss the revelations. The public outcry added urgency to the investigation, and Delgado's team worked around the clock to ensure that every piece of evidence was meticulously documented and preserved. The turning point came when federal agents joined the task force, bringing with them additional resources and expertise in financial crimes. In a coordinated operation, search warrants were executed at several offices associated with the corporate parent. In one unremarkable, windowless building, investigators discovered a hidden safe behind a false wall. Inside, stacks of confidential documents and hard drives revealed a detailed ledger that tracked every instance of missing funds. The ledger, maintained in pristine handwriting, was signed by a mid-level executive whose identity had been obscured in public filings but was known internally to be a key figure in the financial adjustments. The entries in the ledger provided a damning timeline, showing that over the course of a year, the cumulative losses from the missing funds amounted to a sum large enough to suggest that the operation was not merely about shortchanging the company. It was about enriching a network of individuals who had exploited their positions of trust. In subsequent interrogations, several mid-level managers and financial officers were forced to admit that they had been under explicit orders to balance the books at any cost. One nervous manager broke down, confessing that he had been warned, "If you ask too many questions, you might not live to see tomorrow." The chilling nature of his words provided a direct link between the internal culture of intimidation and the brutal murder of Carter Hughes, whose dedication to uncovering the truth had cost him his life. As the investigation neared its climax, Detective Delgado compiled her findings into a comprehensive report that was eventually presented to a grand jury. In a series of closed-door sessions, the full extent of the conspiracy was laid out, a complex network of financial misappropriation, internal pressure, and deliberate silencing that spanned from the retail floor of Fresh Harvest Market to the upper echelons of its corporate structure. The grand jury returned indictments on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to murder, implicating several mid-level executives who had been directly involved in the cover-up. Although some of the highest-ranking figures managed to elude prosecution by exploiting legal loopholes and corporate protections, the indictments marked a significant victory for the investigators. The trial that followed was a protracted affair, drawing intense media scrutiny and stirring passionate debate in the community. In a packed courtroom filled with local residents, journalists, and community leaders, federal prosecutors presented a meticulous case built on a foundation of forensic evidence, digital records, and the heartfelt testimonies of former employees. Expert witnesses explained how the discrepancies, when aggregated over time, amounted to a staggering loss, one that could only be the result of deliberate embezzlement rather than innocent error. Former employees, their voices low with emotion, recounted a culture where dissent was suppressed and questioning the official figures was tantamount to inviting danger. Detective Delgado took the stand, her testimony measured and precise as she recounted the discovery of Carter's body and the painstaking steps taken to reconstruct his final hours. Her words painted a vivid picture of a man who had risked everything to expose the truth, a truth that had clearly threatened the interests of those in power. The courtroom fell silent as she described the recovered ledger, the encrypted emails, and the final, desperate note left in Carter's grasp. While several mid-level managers and financial officers were convicted on charges of fraud and conspiracy, the trial ended without fully unmasking the top figures behind the cover-up. Many felt that although justice had been partially served, the network of corruption was too deeply rooted to be entirely eradicated by a single legal proceeding. The elusive signatures and the redacted names in several documents remained a somber reminder that some secrets, however carefully guarded, might persist in the shadows. In the aftermath of the trial, Fresh Harvest Market reopened its doors to a community that had been irrevocably changed by the revelations. The familiar hum of daily commerce was now interwoven with cautious vigilance. Shoppers and employees alike carried with them an awareness that even the most ordinary settings could hide extraordinary darkness. Local regulatory agencies, spurred by public demand, instituted sweeping reforms designed to increase transparency in corporate accounting practices and to enhance protections for those who dared to question irregularities. Detective Delgado continued her work with a quiet intensity that belied the personal toll the case had taken on her. Each day, as she patrolled the corridors of the city's institutions or reviewed new evidence in her modest office, she was reminded of Carter's unwavering determination and the heavy price he had paid for speaking out. The case had become a permanent part of the community's fabric, a cautionary tale discussed in boardrooms, debated in town hall meetings, and even incorporated into training sessions for new investigators. Although the legal proceedings had resulted in significant convictions and spurred important reforms, unresolved threads remained: the identity of the shadowy figure glimpsed on surveillance, the final, chilling warnings that continued to surface, and the possibility that the full extent of the conspiracy had yet to be exposed. In time, the story of Carter Hughes and the ensuing cover-up became more than just a chapter in the annals of corporate malfeasance. It evolved into a symbol of the eternal struggle between transparency and secrecy. Scholars, journalists, and community activists cited the case as a turning point, a moment when the hidden costs of silence were laid bare for all to see. It was a story that inspired a renewed commitment to ethical governance and the protection of those who risked their lives to reveal uncomfortable truths. Detective Delgado's own career was forever altered by the experience. The investigation had taught her that truth is fragile, often concealed beneath layers of routine and deception, and that the quest for justice is an unending journey. In the soft glow of early mornings and the quiet moments before dusk, she would revisit the details of the case, flipping through Carter's notebook, re-watching grainy surveillance footage, and reflecting on the whispered confessions of those who had once worked in fear. Each recollection was a reminder that even when partial victories are won in the courtroom, the battle against corruption and the preservation of integrity must continue relentlessly. As the seasons turned and the city moved forward, the memory of that fateful night remained etched into the collective consciousness of the community. In the gentle murmur of everyday conversations, in the careful scrutiny of new financial reports, and in the steadfast efforts of reform-minded officials, the legacy of Carter Hughes endured. His story was not one of neat conclusions or heroic finales. It was a mosaic of courage, loss, and the unyielding determination to confront injustice, no matter how deeply it was hidden. In the midst of busy crowds and the ordinary routines of life at Fresh Harvest Market, the truth had emerged, fragile yet powerful, a reminder that every secret, however well guarded, carries a price. And while the network of corruption had not been completely dismantled by a single case, the investigation had ignited a spark of change that would continue to challenge the status quo. Detective Delgado, with her resolute spirit, carried that spark forward, dedicating herself to a future where the quest for honesty would remain paramount. There was no tidy ending to the saga. The intricate web of deceit, the murmurs of hidden transactions, and the anonymous threats served as a constant call to remain vigilant. In a world where routine and revelation often collided in unexpected ways, the pursuit of truth proved to be an endless endeavor, a struggle that transformed not only the lives of those who dared to uncover secrets, but also the institutions that were meant to serve the public good. And so, amid the constant flow of shoppers in a seemingly ordinary grocery store parking lot, the legacy of Carter Hughes lived on as a solemn reminder. Every time an audit was conducted, every time a new regulation was introduced, there was a quiet nod to the man who had given everything in his search for clarity. His memory was preserved in whispered conversations, in policy debates, and in the determined eyes of investigators who knew that no secret, no matter how deeply interred in the fabric of everyday life, could remain hidden forever. In a sprawling outdoor amphitheater renowned for its live music and vibrant atmosphere, the night of a headline concert promised energy and euphoria. The venue, a beloved gathering place for thousands of fans and a hub for performers, typically pulsed with creative spirit and community pride. That evening, as the stage lights burst to life and the crowd roared with anticipation, few could have foreseen that one fateful moment backstage would unravel into a mystery that would haunt every corner of the venue for years to come. Amid the controlled chaos of a high-profile show, Tommy Rivera, a dedicated stage manager known for his meticulous planning and warm rapport with the crew, was busy ensuring that every light cue and sound effect was perfectly timed. Trusted by artists and technicians alike, Tommy had become the unsung hero behind the magic of the performance. But in the midst of the final set, just as the band launched into an electrifying number, an unexpected disruption rippled through the backstage area. During a brief intermission, when the atmosphere shifted from the rapt attention of the audience to the hectic bustle behind the scenes, a security guard on his routine circuit discovered Tommy's lifeless body in a secluded corridor near the stage wings. The man lay slumped against a row of sound equipment, his eyes frozen in a final expression of shock. Nearby, a small scrap of paper, stained with ink and a few droplets of dark fluid, was clutched in his hand. The hurried scrawl read only, "Not all lights shine truth." Within minutes, uniformed officers and forensic experts converged on the area, transforming the normally energetic chaos of the backstage into a somber crime scene. Detective Renee Park, a seasoned investigator whose reputation for unraveling complex cases had earned her respect throughout the department, arrived with quiet determination. Surveying the dim corridor, she noted the eerie orderliness, no signs of a desperate struggle, no overturned props or scattered personal effects. Every detail, from the careful placement of the victim to the solitary note left behind, hinted at a premeditated act, a message designed to intimidate and silence. Detective Park immediately began gathering accounts from the staff. Crew members, still shaken by the abrupt interruption to their routine, recalled Tommy as someone who never missed a beat. "Tommy was our rock," said Darren, a lighting technician with a gentle manner, always ensuring every detail was perfect. "I never imagined something like this could happen to him." Others mentioned that in recent weeks Tommy had seemed distracted, frequently glancing at a secure phone and scribbling in a small notebook he kept hidden in his locker. A sound engineer, Maria, confided that Tommy had grown increasingly tense about unexplained delays in equipment orders and missing supplies for the upcoming tour dates, a topic he rarely discussed openly. Back at Tommy's modest dressing room, investigators uncovered a collection of personal belongings that revealed a man far more complex than his public persona suggested. Among the items was a well-worn journal bound in faded leather. Its pages, filled with neat, deliberate handwriting, chronicled his daily observations, technical notes on equipment schedules, and cryptic remarks that hinted at irregularities in the venue's operational processes. One passage, written only days before his death, read, "Every show hides a secret. Tonight, if we fail to adjust the missing pieces, the truth may burn us all." The language was uncharacteristically somber and urgent, a secret investigation that Tommy had undertaken on his own time, driven by a growing suspicion that the routine operations behind the scenes were not as straightforward as they appeared. Digital forensics later recovered fragments of deleted messages from Tommy's work tablet, which he had used sporadically during the hectic hours before the performance. Among the recovered texts was a terse, chilling warning from an unknown contact. "Don't let the spotlight reveal everything." The tone was void of sentiment, merely functional yet loaded with menace. This digital breadcrumb, coupled with his journal entries, gradually convinced Detective Park that Tommy's inquiries had threatened powerful interests that were willing to resort to extreme measures to keep their secrets hidden. As the investigation expanded, Detective Park interviewed various members of the production team, from stagehands to sound technicians, to reconstruct Tommy's final hours. One assistant stage manager recalled that earlier that night, Tommy had received a phone call in a hushed tone. "He looked disturbed after that call," the assistant said. "He kept asking if everything was in order and then left for the corridor, like he was heading somewhere specific." Another crew member noted that Tommy had been unusually cautious in handling equipment deliveries over the past few weeks, often double-checking invoices and questioning delays that other staff accepted without protest. The pattern suggested that Tommy had been onto something, perhaps a discrepancy in the equipment orders or a hidden scheme involving stolen or diverted merchandise. Detective Park's inquiry soon turned toward the operational side of the amphitheater. Public records and internal reports from the venue revealed that, over the past year, there had been a series of irregularities in the maintenance logs and equipment inventories. In one internal memo, a technician had noted that a particular set of lighting fixtures had gone missing from the storage without proper documentation. Although such discrepancies might have been dismissed as human error in a busy environment, when cross-referenced with Tommy's detailed notes, they pointed to a more deliberate pattern. A system where small items were systematically removed and resold on the black market, or used to fund clandestine personal endeavors. The investigation took an unexpected twist when a member of the security team, a veteran named Keith Reynolds, recalled a peculiar incident several nights before the concert. "I saw someone in a dark jacket near the secure storage area," Keith said, his eyes narrowing as he recalled the details. "He was carrying a large duffel bag and seemed to know his way around as if he belonged there." Although Keith couldn't identify the man with certainty, his testimony raised the possibility that an insider, someone with legitimate access, might have been involved in the theft of equipment and perhaps in silencing Tommy when his discoveries threatened to expose the operation. Simultaneously, Detective Park's digital team uncovered additional evidence from the venue's surveillance system. In a series of grainy but revealing clips, a figure was seen in the restricted backstage area around the time of Tommy's murder. His movements were measured and deliberate, and although his face was partially obscured by shadows and the brim of a cap, his gait was unmistakably purposeful. The footage, when analyzed in tandem with cell tower data from the area, indicated that the man had been near the security office minutes before the body was discovered. The data did not match any known employee or frequent contractor, intensifying the mystery of his identity and role. As the layers of the investigation gradually unfolded, a broader narrative began to emerge. It became evident that Tommy had been investigating not only the theft of equipment, but also a deeper, more disturbing operation, a network of individuals who were using the amphitheater's internal resources to fund an illicit underground market. Rumors in local circles suggested that certain members of the production team, as well as a few high-ranking staff, were involved in a scheme to divert surplus equipment and sell it to unscrupulous dealers. The profits from these operations, though small in isolation, accumulated over time into significant sums. For those involved, the operation had grown into a way to secure personal gain, but it also represented a threat to the integrity of a cherished community institution. Detective Park began to piece together the financial trail, using recovered digital logs and internal audit reports. What she found was a series of small regular transfers, each one barely noticeable on its own, that over a period of months totaled an amount that could only be explained by deliberate misappropriation. The transfers were marked with innocuous labels like equipment adjustments and maintenance allowances, but their regularity and cumulative total suggested that they were part of an ongoing cover-up. The evidence pointed increasingly toward an operation run by a clandestine group within the venue, an operation that likely had the backing of higher management, given its scale and the access required to manipulate the records. In a decisive breakthrough, forensic accountants uncovered a hidden ledger from the venue's internal network, a meticulously kept record that had been stored in a secure, password-protected folder. The ledger detailed every instance of missing equipment, along with the corresponding adjustments made in the financial records. The entries were annotated in neat, precise handwriting that matched samples found in Tommy's own notebook. The ledger revealed that the discrepancies had started about a year earlier and had grown steadily over time. More disturbingly, the ledger included several entries that referenced final verifications and no further inquiries, phrases that implied that once someone discovered the truth, they would be silenced for good. Armed with this overwhelming evidence, Detective Park coordinated a series of discreet interviews with former employees who had once worked in the security and maintenance departments. One such former employee, a quiet man named Richard "Rick" Franklin, recounted that there had been a noticeable shift in the office culture after new management took over 6 months ago. People started whispering about extra payments, about orders that shouldn't be questioned, Rick recalled. I even heard rumors that anyone who looked too closely at the records would simply vanish from the payroll. His testimony, though delivered in a subdued tone, painted a grim picture of an environment where loyalty was coerced and truth was suppressed at any cost. As federal agents were eventually brought in to assist with the financial investigation, the case expanded into a full-scale inquiry into the management practices at the amphitheater. A joint task force was established, and over the following weeks, search warrants were executed at several administrative offices. In one long-forgotten filing room, agents uncovered a trove of confidential memos, internal audit reports, and digital files that confirmed the systematic diversion of funds and equipment. One file, in particular, contained an unsigned memo that read, "Ensure that the numbers remain balanced, no questions asked." The memo was dated several months before Tommy's death, establishing a timeline that corroborated his own notes. The collective evidence made it increasingly clear that Tommy's murder was the tragic culmination of an effort to silence a persistent questioner, a man who had dared to expose a scheme that was deeply embedded in the fabric of the venue's operations. During the subsequent interrogations, several mid-level managers finally broke down. One manager, his voice wavering with regret, confessed that he had been ordered to adjust the records and that questioning the discrepancies was considered a serious breach of conduct. "I was told that if I ever dug too deeply, I'd be dealt with," he admitted, tears glistening in his eyes. His chilling confession, along with the amassed physical and digital evidence, provided a damning narrative that linked the theft of equipment and funds directly to an internal cover-up, one that had escalated to violence when Tommy had threatened to reveal everything. As the trial commenced, the courtroom became a stage for an intense and lengthy legal battle. Federal prosecutors presented a detailed account of the covert operation, explaining how minor irregularities in daily records, when aggregated over time, amounted to a deliberate misappropriation of resources. Expert forensic accountants took the stand, using charts and data to demonstrate the precise pattern of the missing equipment and the corresponding adjustments in the financial logs. Witnesses testified about the culture of silence that had been enforced, with several former employees describing threats that had been made against anyone who dared to question the official figures. Detective Park herself was called to testify. On the stand, she recounted the discovery of Tommy's body, the meticulous process of gathering evidence from the dim corridor, and the painstaking reconstruction of his final hours. Her testimony was marked by a quiet intensity as she described the small details, the torn piece of paper with its cryptic warning, the specific entries in Tommy's notebook, the grainy surveillance footage capturing a figure in a dark jacket, and the hidden ledger that laid bare the scale of the operation. Every word resonated with the weight of a truth that had been suppressed for far too long. While several mid-level employees were convicted on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to murder, many of the top figures behind the cover-up managed to escape the harshest penalties through legal technicalities and corporate protections. The lead manager, whose signature had been found on the majority of the questionable transactions, received a lengthy prison sentence, but the identity of the true orchestrator of the scheme, a shadowy figure rumored to have issued the orders, remained unknown. The trial ended with a mix of relief and lingering disquiet as members of the community questioned whether justice had been fully served. In the aftermath of the legal proceedings, the amphitheater continued to host performances under a veil of cautious optimism. The lights that once symbolized the magic of live music now cast long shadows that reminded people of the dark undercurrents that had once flowed beneath its surface. New internal policies were implemented, and local authorities tightened oversight of operational procedures in public venues. Community activists, spurred by the case, organized meetings and public forums to demand greater accountability and transparency from those in power. The story of Tommy Rivera's unwavering quest for the truth, and the ultimate price he paid for it, became a somber lesson in the perils of silence and the critical importance of vigilance. Detective Park, though recognized for her role in bringing some measure of justice to a corrupted system, remained haunted by the unanswered questions. Late at night, when the bustling energy of the amphitheater faded into the quiet hum of the city, she would return to her office to reread Tommy's journal and study the recovered digital files. There was a particular grainy frame from the surveillance footage that captured the dark figure, a glimpse of a face, half hidden in shadow, that she could not shake from her memory. It was a reminder that in the vast tapestry of human activity, some threads remain unresolved, their true nature obscured by layers of secrecy. In one final, poignant moment, Detective Park received an unmarked envelope delivered to her desk. Inside was a single typed message: "Every question has its price." There was no further explanation, just the unsettling implication that those who sought to expose hidden truths had to be prepared to pay dearly for their curiosity. This note, enigmatic and chilling, reinforced her commitment to her work, even as it left an indelible scar on her conscience. As the seasons turned and the amphitheater continued to pulse with life under the starlit sky, the legacy of that fateful night endured in quiet conversations among staff and in the cautious optimism of reform-minded officials. While legal victories had forced changes in operational protocols and inspired community-driven initiatives for transparency, the case of Tommy Rivera and the clandestine cover-up served as an ongoing reminder that corruption can hide in the unlikeliest of places. The investigation had uncovered a network of greed, indifference, and the ruthless suppression of dissent, a network that, despite its partial dismantling, still left shadows in its wake. The story of Tommy Rivera became more than just a tragic headline. It transformed into a symbol of the courage required to challenge entrenched power and the relentless pursuit of accountability. It was discussed in local seminars on public safety, cited in academic studies of organizational ethics, and even served as an inspiration for independent filmmakers who sought to capture the dark interplay between everyday life and hidden criminality. For Detective Park, every new case was approached with a deep-seated awareness that beneath the veneer of normalcy, extraordinary dangers could lurk. Whether it was a forgotten ledger entry, a A suspicious gap in a digital log, or an anonymous warning left behind in a moment of quiet malice, the pursuit of truth demanded unwavering dedication, even when the answers seemed to slip through one's fingers like shadows. In the end, the investigation did not offer a neat final resolution where every question was answered and every mystery laid to rest. Instead, it left behind an enduring mosaic of courage, loss, and the unending quest for integrity, a story that was both a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope. In a world where secrets can be carefully concealed behind the bright lights of a public venue, the determination to expose the hidden narratives that undermine trust becomes a lifelong commitment. And as long as there are individuals willing to delve into the unknown, to question what others have accepted without scrutiny, there will always be a chance that even the most elusive truths will eventually emerge from the darkness. Detective Park's legacy, shaped by the investigation into Tommy Rivera's murder, became a quiet call to action for those who believed that transparency and accountability were not just ideals but necessities for a fair society. While the corridors of the amphitheater continued to echo with the sounds of live music and jubilant fans, a deeper understanding of the cost of secrecy took root among the community and officials alike. The lessons learned from that humid, unsettling night served as a permanent reminder that every uncovered secret, every piece of overlooked evidence, is a step toward a world where truth is not sacrificed at the altar of convenience or corruption. And so, as the public venue thrived under the starlit sky, and daily life resumed its measured rhythm, the case of Tommy Rivera persisted in memory, a somber, multifaceted narrative that challenged everyone to look beyond the surface and to appreciate the immense value of the truth, no matter how deeply it may be hidden.